How many times can you play a vinyl record before it gets worn out? It's a subject of much speculation, fear, and uncertainty because depending on who you ask, the answer varies drastically.
They'll play Dark Side of the Moon 5 times, and then the grooves will all be chewed up, and they'll say, this is a stupid hobby. Why did I get into this?
Now, listen to and compare this record that's been played over 3,000 times. Racing with the moon. Sounds great, doesn't it?
And do inexpensive record players really cause that much more damage than high-end turntables, or are the claims of them destroying records overblown and exaggerated?
You really don't know who you're dealing with, do you?
Also, how many times do people actually play their records in real-world use? And is there any truth to the claim that playing a record again immediately causes much more damage than giving it some time to rest before playing it again?
Like a worn-out recording of a favorite song.
These are the questions I've sought to answer in this video, which has been 2 months in the making, so I hope you'll think it's worth your time to watch it. Here are my 3 test subjects, which I believe are representative of the vast majority of record players and turntables that are being sold and in use today. Number 1 is a Quasar CS7030 stereo system with a built-in turntable. It has a ceramic cartridge with a 0.7mm conical sapphire stylus tracking at 5.5 grams, similar to many inexpensive record players sold today by brands like Crosley and Victrola. Next is an Audio-Technica AT-PL50 turntable with a magnetic cartridge with a 0.6mm conical diamond stylus tracking at 3.5 grams, similar to many other entry-level to mid-range turntables being sold today. And finally, a Technics SLQD33 turntable with a Grado magnetic cartridge with a 0.3 by 0.7mm elliptical diamond stylus tracking at 1.5 grams, similar to many mid-range to high-end turntables. And one feature all 3 of these turntables have in common, which you may have noticed, is the ability to automatically start playing a record at the touch of a button without needing to open the lid, which is important for this test because this way I can keep the covers closed on all 3 turntables for the entire duration of the test. That way, the amount of dust being picked up will be kept to a minimum. And just as important as the equipment I'll be using in this test is the records I'll be playing. And this is where I struck gold at the local thrift store a while ago. I found 10 copies of the same record for 99 cents each. Restore My Soul by the Marcus Family. And yes, it is religious music.
Oh, this isn't going to be about Jesus, is it?
All things are about Jesus, Homer.
There they are, the Marcus Family. And judging by the decor, clothing, and hairstyles, I'm guessing it's from the 1970s. I'm getting a fundamentalist Brady Bunch vibe from it. I can't tell for sure that these records were never played because they're not sealed, but especially if they were meant to be given out at a church or a Bible camp or something like that, it's very likely they were never sealed to begin with. And considering the quantity of these records that were on the shelf at the thrift store, this is not even all of them that were there, it's highly unlikely that these were ever played. I've already sampled one of these records, and it is a very high quality pressing with virtually no surface noise. Not like some records I bought where even if it's brand new, it sounds like Rice Krispies because they use such poor quality vinyl. Of course, it makes sense that these records would be pressed on virgin vinyl. Alright, no more religious jokes. And by the way, these records are 4 ounces or about 115 grams in weight. So definitely not a heavyweight pressing. I went through all 10 records and culled the few that were visibly warped, because as the stylus rides that warp up and down, it's going to increase the amount of wear to the record, so obviously this one didn't make the cut. I picked out 4 of the records which were the flattest to serve as my test subjects. I'll write a red U on this one to indicate that it will remain unplayed to serve as the control of the test. I'll write a black Q on this one to indicate it will be played on the Quasar, a blue A on this one to indicate it will be played on the Audio-Technica turntable, and a green T on this one to indicate it will be played on the Technics turntable. I marked both sides of the records, but for the test I'll be using side 2 because just to be certain I did a test upload of the entire album, and sure enough 2 of the songs on side 1 generated copyright claims for the composition. Now we need to decide how many times to play the record, and it needs to be something realistic, because I don't have time to play the record thousands of times, like some companies claimed you could if you used their equipment, and even if I did, that wouldn't be representative of real-world use. This company, Empire, who made the bold claim that your records would still sound brand new even after playing them 5,000 times using their phono cartridges, even admitted as such when they said 5,000 complete plays was more than 50 times the ordinary life usage of a record. So that means ordinarily, most people will only play the records less than 100 times. Here's another manufacturer, ADC, who claimed that their phono cartridges cause no perceivable wear over the life of your records. If you read the text, it says, industry sources estimate the life of a record, the average number of times the record is played, to be 40 to 50 plays. And RCA was even more conservative when they were developing a new formulation of vinyl for making quadraphonic records. They wrote in their engineering journal, how many playings must a disc withstand to be considered acceptable? This is certainly a speculative point, but one that should be defined. We felt that a consumer would be likely to play a disc in quad mode probably at least 10 times during its useful life, and maybe as many as 25 or more times if he is in the habit of showing off his sound system to friends. So we have 3 different companies in industry saying that the average number of times most people would play their records in ordinary use was somewhere between 10 and 100. So I'm going to take the middle road and play these records 50 times for this test. And the Discwasher brand of record cleaning products concurs. They wrote most albums are played a total of 50 times or less. But just as important as deciding how many times to play the record is deciding how often to play the record, because you may have seen other tests in which people play a record over and over again immediately with no delay between each play, which is definitely not representative of real-world use, and it can actually cause much more damage to the record playing it that way. As Jerry McWilliams stated in his book, The Preservation and Restoration of Sound Recordings, no disc should ever be played more than once every 24 hours. This is an important point to observe. The 24-hour interval allows the vinyl or shellac to relax after its stressing. It has been found that playing a vinyl disc 2 times in a row creates the same amount of wear as 50 to 100 normal playings spaced 16 hours apart. And this paper, Preventative Maintenance for Audio Discs and Tapes by Jim Farrington, says basically the same thing. He wrote, one way to curb wear of LPs is to limit the number of playings and allow them to rest at least 24 hours before they are played again. Subsequent studies have resulted in some contradictory figures, but it nevertheless stands to reason that the less frequently a disc is used, the less damage it will sustain. But High Fidelity magazine was skeptical when a reader mentioned that claim about not playing a record more than once every 24 hours. They wrote, responsibly conducted tests have indicated that there is a vinyl fatigue recovery cycle, but others that seem equally responsible in their methodology have not. And they mentioned they don't have any problem playing the records 2 or 3 times in a row, but they say, we wouldn't play our favorite direct cut discs with a changer's auto repeat cycle as background for a party any more than we would store master tapes near the permanent magnet of a loudspeaker. So some experts were adamant about not playing your records more than once per day, while others threw cold water on that theory. So I'm going to meet them in the middle. For this test, I'll play the records once per day on weekdays and twice per day on weekends and holidays, which I think is reasonable and reflective of real-world use. So here's the official test setup. I know it's not the most glamorous location, but it'll have to do. I made sure all the turntables are level, and here's the Quasar. And the neat thing about this is it has an aux input. So what I did is I connected the two other turntables to this mixer, and then the output of the mixer goes into aux input of this system. That way I can select any one of the three turntables to listen to through these set of cans here, just to make sure everything is working properly. So I have the Q record in the Quasar, the T record in the Technics, and the A record in the Audio-Technica. And I cleaned all three records and cleaned all three needles, so we're ready to go for our first test here on May 19th at 6:30 p.m. So here we go, the first official play on the Quasar, on the Technics, and on the Audio-Technica. Here's the notebook I'll use as the test log. So play number 1 was on May 19th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. It's now June 7th, and here I am beginning play number 25 of the records. So I am now halfway through the test. I have not opened any of these turntables. The covers have remained shut the entire time I've been playing the records. And here's the logbook so far. The entries in black are the days when I played the record once, and the entries in red are the days when I played the records twice, once in the morning and once in the evening. So today I'll write in June 7th, 2024, 6:02 p.m. It's 6:04 p.m. on June 25th, and this is it, play number 50. So here we go, starting the Quasar, starting the Technics, and starting the Audio-Technica. And here's the final log entry, 6:25/2024, 6:04 p.m. The final play is now complete, so tomorrow I'll come back, take these records out of these cocoons they've been in for the past 2 months, and let you hear what they sound like when played on my good turntable, to see exactly how worn out these records are after being played 50 times. I'm going to use my Technics SL1900 direct drive turntable with a Stanton 681 EEE calibration standard phono cartridge. These were hand calibrated at the factory in Plainview, Long Island to give you the flattest frequency response and lowest distortion, and the little brush on the front not only cleans the record as it plays, it also discharges static and reduces tone arm resonance. I'll record them into the computer and give you a direct comparison to see if you can hear any difference between the record that wasn't played and the 3 records that were played 50 times on 3 different turntables.
God sent His Son to be our Savior. God sent His Son to be our Savior. God sent His Son to be our Savior. He is the way, He is the truth, He is the life. 'Twas Jesus Christ who came to save
Yeah, I couldn't hear any difference either, even on the record that was played 50 times on the worst turntable in the test. No increase in surface noise, no loss of high frequencies, no increase in distortion. It still sounded as good as new. And yes, those definitely were 4 separate recordings. There's no sleight of hand going on here. It's due to the incredible speed stability of Direct Drive that was able to edit them together so seamlessly. To make sure my ears weren't playing tricks on me, I loaded the audio from the record that was unplayed and the audio from the record that was played 50 times on the Quasar, which should have the most wear on it, so I can run an analysis on them and compare them. And it turns out there is a difference between the two, but it's so minimal that it's not going to be audible. We're talking about fractions of a decibel here. Same thing with the spectrum analysis graph. They're not identical, but the difference between the two isn't really noticeable until you get up around 18,000 Hertz, which is beyond what most people can hear. As for why these records experienced virtually no wear in this test, aside from the power of the Holy Spirit, I can think of one definite major factor and a couple of maybes. Here in Chapter 17 of the RCA Radiotron Designer's Handbook, Reproduction from Records, it says, dust is the most important cause of record and stylus wear with vinyl records in the home, and care should be taken to reduce it to a minimum. And that's exactly what we did by keeping the dust covers of all 3 turntables closed for the entire duration of the test. Because no matter how clean your home is or how well groomed you are, every time you open the lid of your turntable, or if you play it with the lid open, that record is going to become a magnet picking up any airborne dust. To demonstrate just how much of a difference cleanliness makes to the life of your records, Electronics Illustrated magazine performed a test using a turntable tracking at 3.75 grams, slightly heavier than the Audio-Technica turntable I used, on 2 records. One left out on a table face up for 4 days, the other washed in a detergent just before playing and kept covered during the test. The results: washed record, 833 plays, wear noticeable on careful listening, but sound still excellent. Dirty record, 135 plays, roughly the same wear, a fuzzier sound. So even just cleaning a record once will make it last over 6 times longer than playing a dirty record. Now as for the maybes. Maybe this Stanton 681 EE phono cartridge is uncommonly good at making worn records sound acceptable, because it does have a 0.2 by 0.7 mil elliptical stylus, which is a smaller profile than any of the styluses on the turntables I used in the test. So perhaps it's reaching a little bit deeper into the groove and playing a portion of it that remains undamaged. So now I'll perform another comparison, this time using a far more pedestrian Shure M75 cartridge. Still a very good cartridge, but it was definitely on the low end of their lineup. And I have on it a generic Fansteel 4760DE stylus.
I'm gonna be gone in the twinkling of an eye. I'm gonna be gone. Won't have time to say goodbye. I'm gonna be gone. Could be while I'm singing the song. I'm gonna be gone and it won't be long. I'm gonna be gone.
Again, there definitely is a measurable difference, but unless you have perfect hearing above 18 kilohertz, you probably won't be able to notice it. And the other big maybe is that maybe there is some truth after all to this crazy theory that playing a record again immediately causes much more damage to it than waiting some time for it to rest and recover before playing it again. And it stands to reason that if such a phenomenon exists, it's going to be much more pronounced on heavier tracking turntables that place a greater amount of stress onto the groove as they play it than on lighter tracking turntables. So maybe that's why those audio journalists never noticed a problem playing a record several times in a row on their high-quality turntables. Whereas doing so on an inexpensive record player will cause the effect to become much more apparent. To test this theory, I'll take the Q record, which was already played 50 times on the Quasar, and turn it into QR to indicate I'll be quickly repeating the same song over and over again an additional 50 times without giving it any time to wait between each play, to see if that substantially increases the amount of audible wear. Here's the record after a portion of it has been played 50 more times on the Quasar, this time quickly repeated instead of waiting hours between each play. So let's put it back on the Technics and see if we can hear how much additional wear that has caused. This time I definitely did notice an increase in groove wear, but once the music began, it was hard to tell any degradation other than a little bit of crackle. And I bet if I just played that for you without telling you anything about it, you never would have known it had been played a total of 100 times on a cheap record player with a heavy tracking ceramic cartridge. And it turns out RCA had similar results with that vinyl compound they made for quadraphonic records. They said it enables 4-channel playback with satisfactory separation and signal-to-noise ratios after the product has been played at least 100 times on a conventional, inexpensive stereo player with a conical stylus and 5 grams of pressure. So, the moral of the story is not that vinyl records never wear out and you can just go on playing them without a care in the world. No, they definitely do wear out. But as long as you keep them clean and store and handle them properly and replace your stylus when necessary, you can get a lifetime of enjoyment out of your records. Even when playing them on inexpensive equipment that you may have been fear-mongered into thinking is going to destroy them. Now I realize this video leaves some questions unanswered, which I'm sure people will be asking about. For example, the records I've been playing are probably between 40 and 50 years old. What about new vinyl? Is it as durable as the old stuff? It sure seems to pick up a hell of a lot more dust than old vinyl does. And what about colored vinyl? Is it as durable as black vinyl? But that will have to wait until a future video. Until then, I hope your soul has been restored by the Marcus family, and if you're interested, I will upload a copy of the entire album to my music channel and include a link to it in the description.
Stripped of all that once I clung to, Lord, I come. Though in your eyes I know I'm nothing, yet I come.